I thought the divorce papers were just a civil conclusion to a terrible marriage until I saw my name erased from the company files that very same morning. Then a stranger called to say he held copies of emails that could strip my husband of everything. But the thing that truly chilled my blood was realizing the person betraying me was not just him alone. My name is Ava Whitmore, and I am 32 years old. Living in Harbor Ridge, Massachusetts, usually felt like existing inside a snow globe where everything was perfectly curated and painfully visible. I worked at Whitlock and Rowe Group, a family company housed in a sleek glass monolith that seemed designed to make everyone inside feel small. My title was Operations and Client Care, but to everyone else, I was just the boss's wife. I was a fixture to be tolerated, not a colleague to be respected. My marriage to Graham Whitlock was supposed to be the envy of the town. He was the charming heir with the soft voice and the polished smile, but for the last 6 months, that softness had turned into a polite frost. We were roommates who occasionally shared a bed, drifting past each other like ghosts in our own hallway. It started to unravel on our anniversary. Graham had texted me at 5 o'clock. Stuck with clients. Sorry. Ava. Dinner is on me tomorrow. I ate takeout alone at the kitchen island. When he finally stumbled in past midnight, he draped his suit jacket over the chair and went straight to the shower without kissing me. I walked over to hang it up. That was when I smelled it. It was a heavy, cloying scent of vanilla and cheap musk that definitely did not belong to me. I brushed the lapel and a single strand of gold glitter stuck to my thumb. I stared at it under the harsh kitchen lights. It looked like a tiny, sparkling scar. The next morning, I tried to brush it off as paranoia. I opened our shared digital family calendar to check the schedule for the weekend. My heart skipped a beat. There was a new entry added for Friday morning at 9 o'clock. It read simply, Ava HR Review. Graham had not mentioned a review. I was not due for a review. My phone buzzed. It was my mother-in-law, Marianne Whitlock. Her voice was unusually high and sugary. Ava. Darling, I just wanted to remind you. Keep a low profile on Instagram this week. We are doing some branding updates. Best not to post anything personal. Marianne, is everything okay? Graham seems distant. Oh, stop it. He is just stressed. You need to support him, not nag him. Just keep quiet and look pretty. All right, I hung up, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. The office felt different that day, too. I walked into the break room and the conversation died instantly. 2 junior associates were whispering near the coffee machine. I caught the tail end of a sentence. She is always on the 14th floor after 5. They saw me and immediately scattered. The 14th floor was executive territory. It was where Graham's office was. I tried to ask the receptionist, a girl who usually loved to gossip, but she refused to meet my eyes. Is Graham in a meeting? I asked. She flinched. I can't say. Mrs. Whitlock. He gave strict instructions. I went back to my desk, my hands shaking slightly. Then a notification pinged on my laptop. It was an email from the legal department, evidently copied to me by mistake. The subject line made the air leave my lungs. Finalize separation package A, W. A, W, Ava Whitmore. They were firing me. That was it. That was why Graham was distant and why Marianne was telling me to stay off social media. They were pushing me out of the company. I sat there for an hour, staring at the screen, waiting for someone to come and escort me out by security, but nobody came. I left exactly at 5 o'clock. I drove home in silence, my mind racing with questions. Why would they fire me without a meeting? Why the secrecy? When I unlocked the front door of our house, the lights were off. It was too quiet. On the mahogany console table in the foyer, right where we usually tossed our keys, sat a plain white envelope. There was no stamp and no name. I picked it up. The paper felt thick and expensive. I tore it open. Inside, There was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note in jagged, hurried block letters. Do not sign anything tomorrow. The conference room on the 14th floor was designed to intimidate. It was a box of soundproof glass suspended over the city, air-conditioned to a temperature that made goosebumps rise on my arms. When I walked in at 9 o'clock, Graham was already seated at the head of the long marble table. He did not stand up to greet me. He did not even look up from his tablet. Beside him sat the director of human resources and a man in a charcoal suit I had never seen before. I pulled out a chair and the leather creaked loudly in the silence. "What is going on?" "Graham," I asked. "Is this about the review?" Graham finally looked at me. His eyes were devoid of the warmth I had woken up next to for 5 years. He slid a heavy stack of documents across the table. The first page was not a performance review. It was a petition for dissolution of marriage. Underneath that was a separation agreement and general release for Whitlock and Rowe Group. "It is just a formality." "Ava," Graham said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "We both know things have not been working. This is the cleanest way, just procedure." I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at the HR director's laptop screen, which was facing me. It displayed my employee profile. Next to the status field, it already read voluntary resignation, effective date today. "I haven't resigned," I said, my voice trembling. The stranger in the charcoal suit interjected. He leaned forward and clasped his hands. "Mrs. Whitmore, we are framing this as a resignation to protect your reputation. Given your recent inability to handle complex risk management scenarios, the board feels you are currently unfit for your duties." He paused, smiling thinly. "The severance package includes a fully paid 6-week stay at the Serenity Hills Wellness Center. We believe you need treatment for your stress." It was a trap. They were not just firing me. They were building a paper trail to label me as mentally unstable. "Show me the legal basis for this," I demanded. "Show me one instance of professional negligence." Before the lawyer could answer, the glass door swung open. Marianne walked in. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that cost more than my first car. She walked straight to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy and cold. "Oh, Ava," she sighed. "Don't fight it, sweetie. Graham is just doing what is best for the company. Sign the papers. I will make sure you receive $50,000 to get settled. You need to rest." $50,000 to walk away from my marriage and my career. It was an insult wrapped in motherly concern. My hand hovered over the pen. It would be so easy to just sign and make the suffocation stop. Then I remembered the white envelope on my console table. "Do not sign anything tomorrow." I pulled my hand back. The air in the room seemed to freeze. "No," I said. Marianne's smile faltered. Graham stiffened. "Excuse me," the lawyer asked. "I said no," I repeated, my voice gaining strength. "I will not sign anything today. I want my own legal counsel to review this. I need 48 hours. The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if I had tossed a grenade onto the marble table. They had not rehearsed for this. They expected the compliant, grateful Ava. Graham slammed his hand down on the table. The noise made the HR director jump. "You don't have 48 hours. Ava, you sign this now or you walk out with zero. You have nothing if you don't have this family." "Do you understand? Nothing." The venom in his voice shocked me. This was not a drifting apart. This was hatred. In the chaos of Graham's outburst, the HR director nervously tapped her screen to close a window. She was not fast enough. For a split second, I saw a minimized file titled Transition New Exec Assistant. Beside the text was a digital headshot of a young woman with blonde hair and a smile that looked predatory. I stood up, clutching my purse. "I am leaving," I said. "If you want me out, you can have security drag me out." I walked out of the room before they could stop me. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. As I reached the elevator bank, I glanced back through the glass walls of the conference room. Marianne was yelling at the lawyer. But Graham was not listening to his mother. He was standing near the door. The woman from the photo, the new exec assistant, had evidently been waiting in the adjoining office. She had slipped into the room the moment I left. I saw Graham reach out and squeeze her hand tight, his thumb stroking her knuckles with a familiarity that made my stomach turn. He looked up, saw me watching, and dropped her hand instantly. The elevator doors slid shut, severing the view. I leaned against the metal wall and closed my eyes. The divorce papers were a distraction. The job offer was a lie. They were not just trying to get rid of a wife. They were clearing the board for a replacement. I sat in my car in the parking garage, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The tears I expected did not come. Instead, a cold clarity washed over me. I pulled out my phone and dialed Nora Hayes. Nora had been my best friend since college and was now the most tenacious investigative reporter in the county. Ava. Nora answered on the first ring. "You never call at 10 in the morning. Is everything okay?" "No," I said, staring at the elevator doors I had just exited. "Graham just served me divorce papers and tried to force me to sign a resignation letter. They are claiming I am mentally unstable. Nora, I need you to dig. I need to know every lawsuit, every settlement, and every shell company attached to Whitlock and Rowe in the last 5 years. Consider it done," Nora said, her voice dropping to her professional register. "Give me an hour." I hung up. I needed to know who else was involved. I walked back into the lobby, composing my face into a mask of frantic worry. I approached the security desk where old Mr. Henderson sat. He had known me for years. "Mr. Henderson, I am so sorry to bother you," I said, leaning over the counter. "I think I dropped my diamond earring on the 14th floor last night. Could you check the access logs for me? I just need to know who swiped in after 6 o'clock so I can ask them if they saw it." "Mr. Henderson looked at his monitor, then back at me. His eyes shifted away nervously. I can't do that. Mrs. Whitmore, there is a new protocol. Logs for the executive floor are now restricted to senior management only. Your access level was revoked at 9 this morning." I froze. They had scrubbed me from the system while I was still sitting in the conference room. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a message on an encrypted app I hadn't used in months. It was from Ethan Cole, the former IT manager who had been abruptly fired 2 months ago. The message read, "They are building a file to prove you are unstable. Check your login history." I opened my email app and dug into the security settings. My breath hitched. There was a successful login recorded at 2:17 in the morning from a device listed as an iPhone Pro Max. I used an Android. Someone had been accessing my private emails while I slept. I scrolled frantically through my trash folder. That was when I saw it. 3 interview invitations from other companies from last year opportunities I thought I had never received were sitting in the deleted items folder. I had spent months thinking I was unemployable, thinking I was weak and lucky that Graham kept me on. But I wasn't weak. I had been sabotaged. Another message from Ethan came through, this time an image. It was a screenshot of a server directory. There was a hidden folder created 6 months ago titled Ava Narrative. I stared at the screen. It was not a personnel file. It was a PR campaign. They were not just documenting my behavior. They were scripting it. I grabbed a notebook from my glove compartment. The shaking in my hands stopped. I wrote down the time of the login. I wrote down the name of the folder. I wrote down the date my access was revoked. I was no longer a wife mourning a marriage. I was an investigator building a case. My phone rang. It was Nora. "Ava, listen to me," she said, and she sounded breathless. "I found something strange in their public filings. Whitlock and Rowe established a family welfare fund 3 years ago. It is supposed to be for employee assistance, but the primary beneficiary listed on the tax documents isn't the employees. Who is it? I asked. It is you, Nora said. But the signature authorizing the fund. Ava, it looks like yours, but the date is from a week you were in the hospital with pneumonia. My skin prickled. I was the beneficiary of a fund I didn't know existed. Keep digging, I said. I was about to start the car when my phone rang again. It was a local number I did not recognize. I hesitated, then answered. Hello, I have copies of the emails they are terrified of, a male voice said. It was low and hurried. I know about the fund. I know about the girl on the 14th floor. If you want to survive this, don't go home tonight. I checked into a rundown motel off the interstate, the kind of place with flickering neon signs and thin walls that smelled of stale smoke. I turned off the location services on my phone and removed the SIM card. For the first time in my life, safety was not a feeling I took for granted. It was a calculated strategy. 10 minutes later, there was a tentative knock on the door of room 104. I looked through the peephole before sliding the chain lock off. Standing there in a hoodie and jeans was Caleb Doon. I recognized him immediately. He was a quiet, nervous analyst from the finance department who I used to see eating lunch alone in the cafeteria. He looked like he had not slept in days. You came, he said, stepping inside quickly and locking the door behind him. You said you had proof, I replied, keeping my distance near the desk. Why are you helping me? Caleb. He pulled a silver USB drive from his pocket and tossed it onto the faded bedspread. Because they fired me last week for embezzlement, he said, his voice shaking with anger. They needed a scapegoat to explain the missing funds. So they picked me. I need leverage. Ava. I will give you the smoking gun, but you have to promise to help me get immunity when this blows up. What is on there? Open it, he urged. You need to see it to believe it. In that company, there is someone who isn't just sleeping with Graham. They are using you as a vessel. I plugged the drive into my laptop. My hands were steady now, fueled by a cold, hard rage. I clicked on a folder labeled External Contractors. Inside was a series of invoices for a company called A.W. Consulting. I clicked on the monthly ledger. My breath caught in my throat. Every month, for the past 2 years, transfers of $15,000, sometimes $20,000, were being funneled into this company. I don't own a consulting firm, I whispered. According to the state registry. You do, Caleb said. Look at the expense reports. I scrolled down. The money wasn't sitting in an account. It was being spent. Luxury hotel suites in Paris, diamond jewelry, a lease on a Porsche, all of it billed to A.W. Consulting. They are stealing money from the main company, I realized, looking up at him. And they are laundering it through a fake identity using my name. It is not just adultery. Ava, Caleb said, his eyes wide. It is financial identity theft. If the IRS audits Whitlock and Rowe, Graham looks like the victim of a thieving wife. You go to prison. He keeps the house. I felt the room spin. The betrayal was so much deeper than lipstick on a collar. They had turned my existence into a crime scene without me even knowing. Graham isn't smart enough to structure this, I said. He can barely manage his own email. Caleb nodded grimly. You are right. Graham didn't think of this. He is just the puppet. There is someone else in that family who holds the pen. I stared at the glowing screen. If I went to the police tonight, Graham and his lawyers would present the Ava narrative file. They would claim I set up this shell company during a manic episode. They would use the theft as proof of my instability. I was trapped. My phone, now running on Wi-Fi only, buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up. A text from Graham had just come through. You are making things worse. Ava, come home and we can talk about a settlement. Don't force my hand. I was about to type a reply when a second message popped up from Nora. The preview text made my blood run cold. Ava, you need to run. My source at the courthouse just called. They aren't just suing you. They are filing an emergency petition for guardianship tomorrow morning. They intend to strip you of your legal rights. I looked at Caleb. We have to move. I said, they aren't trying to divorce me anymore. They are trying to own me. I did not hire a divorce lawyer. I hired Sloan Mercer. She was a legend in the city for handling corporate fraud and financial abuse, a woman who wore stilettos like weapons and treated emotions as irrelevant data points. Her office was stark and white, transformed within an hour into a war room covered in charts and timelines. "We are not fighting a marriage dissolution," Sloan said, pacing in front of a whiteboard. "We are fighting a corporate hostile takeover. They are banking on you crumbling. They want you crying in bed so they can point a finger and say you are unfit. So, are you going to cry?" "Ava, no," I said, staring at the timeline of events we had constructed. I am done crying. Good. First, we kill their narrative. My first stop was not the courthouse, but the office of a forensic psychiatrist Sloan had on retainer. I spent 3 grueling hours answering questions, solving logic puzzles, and recounting my medical history. I was calm. I was precise. By noon, I had a signed affidavit certifying that I was mentally sound, completely lucid, and capable of making complex financial decisions. The instability argument was dead on arrival. Back in Sloan's office, we went on the offensive. Sloan filed an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order, not just to keep Graham away from me, but to freeze the status quo. More importantly, she filed a litigation hold. "This is a legal bear trap," Sloan explained as she stamped the document. "It legally compels them to preserve every email, text, and server log. If they delete a single byte of data after receiving this, they go to jail for spoliation of evidence." We started sifting through the data Caleb and Ethan had provided. The image of my HR file was projected onto the wall. There were notes dating back 8 months listing episodes of instability and erratic behavior during client meetings. "Look at the metadata," I pointed out, tapping the screen. "The entry times are all late at night. And look at the author ID. It wasn't the HR director. The user ID was M. Whitlock Admin. Marianne," I whispered. She wasn't just comforting me all those months. She was logging into the system and writing a fiction about my mental health to justify firing me later. Nora burst into the office then, slapping a dossier onto the conference table. "I found her," Nora said, breathless. "The girl on the 14th floor. Her name is Brielle Knox." I looked at the photo. It was the same blonde woman I had seen holding Graham's hand. "She is 24. Nora continued. "She was hired 6 months ago as a special consultant. But here is the kicker. Her offer letter wasn't signed by Graham or HR. It was signed by Marianne, and her starting salary is $150,000. That is double the market rate for her position. She is a plant," Sloan mused. "Marianne hired a mistress for her son to destabilize his marriage." Caleb, who was sitting in the corner with his laptop, suddenly spoke up. "It gets worse. I just cracked the encryption on that email chain regarding the restructuring." He turned his laptop so we could see. It was an email from the company's general counsel to Marianne. The subject line was Equity Transfer Strategy. The text read, "Once A.W. is removed from the operational structure due to medical incapacity. Her voting shares revert to the family trust under the morality clause. We need to trigger the exit before the fiscal year ends." I felt a cold chill settle in my bones. "They don't care about the affair," I said, my voice steady. "Graham cheating is just a distraction. The divorce is a smokescreen. This entire thing. The gaslighting, the fake consulting firm, the job offer to Brielle. It is all just a mechanism to trigger a clause in a contract I never read closely enough. They want to strip me of my ownership." Sloan checked her phone and her expression hardened. "Then we are running out of time," she said. "My source just alerted me. Whitlock and Rowe has scheduled an emergency board meeting for tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. You are noticeably absent from the invite list." "What are they doing?" I asked. "They are voting," Sloan said, looking me dead in the eye. My guess is that tomorrow night, they intend to ratify your removal and transfer your shares to Marianne. If they sign those papers, it becomes irreversible. I stood up. I was terrified, but the fear was distant, like noise from another room. Then we need to be in that room, I said. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the lobby of the Whitlock and Row building was eerily silent. The cleaning crew was just finishing their shift when Sloan and I walked past to the security desk. Sloan did not ask for permission. She slammed a court-ordered data preservation mandate onto the marble counter. "We have a writ allowing immediate forensic access to the server room," Sloan told the terrified night guard. "If you pick up that phone to warn anyone, you will be cited for obstruction of justice." 10 minutes later, we were in the server room. The air was frigid and hummed with the sound of cooling fans. The current IT director, a man named Marcus who had replaced Ethan, stood in the corner with his arms crossed, watching us like a hawk because Sloan had threatened to sue him personally if he touched a keyboard. I had my phone on speaker. Ethan was on the line, guiding me from his apartment. "Okay, Ava," Ethan said, his voice tinny through the speaker. "Go to the shared executive drive. Look for a hidden partition labeled Q4 internal." My fingers flew across the keyboard. I found the partition. Inside was the folder Ethan had warned me about Ava narrative. I clicked it open. My stomach dropped. It was a library of fabricated incompetence. There were dozens of emails sent from my work account emails I had never written. One was addressed to our biggest client, apologizing for missing a deadline due to ongoing mental health struggles. "They sent this 2 months ago," I said, feeling the blood rush to my face. "I didn't miss that deadline. Marianne told me the client pushed it back." "Keep looking," Sloan commanded, her eyes scanning the file list. "We need the origin." I opened a document titled Separation Script. It was a literal screenplay. "Graham, it is just a formality. Ava, we both know things have not been working. Graham, you have nothing if you don't have this family." I stared at the screen. My husband had not just been cold. He had been reciting lines written for him by a legal team. Every pause, every sigh, every word he said to me in that conference room was pre-written. "Look at this," I said, opening a PDF labeled Share Transfer Authorization. It was a document signing over my voting rights to the family trust. At the bottom was my signature. It looked perfect. "I never signed this," I said. Sloan leaned in. Right-click, check the metadata. I pulled up the file properties. The document had not been created in the office. The source was listed as Scanner Home Office M, Whitlock. Marianne scanned my signature from an old birthday card or a check, I realized, and she pasted it onto this. "That is forgery," Sloan said, a predatory smile forming on her lips. "That is a felony." But the worst file was in a subfolder named Contingencies. It was a document titled Appendix B. I read the first paragraph and felt like I had been punched in the throat. "If subject resists the voluntary separation, initiate emergency guardianship filing immediately. Position subject as unfit. Isolate from financial assets." Below that was a timeline titled Transition of Public Role. It listed upcoming social events, the charity gala in November, the company Christmas party, even Thanksgiving dinner. Next to each event, where my name should have been, it said attendee Brielle Knox partner. They were not just firing me, they were erasing me. They had already scheduled Brielle to take my seat at the Thanksgiving table. "Download it all," Sloan said, her voice sharp. "Every single byte. We are leaving." As the progress bar hit 100%, I pulled the drive. I felt a strange sensation. The heartbreak was gone. In its place was a cold, mechanical determination. I was not a wife anymore. I was a problem they had failed to delete. We walked out of the server room and headed for the elevators. The doors dinged and slid open. Graham stepped out. He was holding a coffee cup in one hand and Brielle's waist with the other. They both froze when they saw me. Brielle's eyes widened, and she took a half step behind him. Graham looked at me, then at the folder in Sloane's hand. He looked like a child who had been caught breaking a vase. "Ava," he stammered. "What? What are you doing here? Mom said you would just sign the papers." The silence that followed was deafening. He had just admitted everything. He wasn't the mastermind. He was just a boy doing what his mother told him to do. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at him. "I know," I said softly. Then I stepped past him into the elevator, leaving him standing there with the woman he had been assigned to love. I jammed my hand between the closing elevator doors. The metal sensors beeped and the doors bounced back open. Graham flinched, taking a stumbling step backward as if I had brandished a weapon. I stepped back out into the hallway, Sloane following close behind me like a shadow. "You cheated on me," I said, my voice vibrating with a calm I did not feel. "That is one thing. Graham. But you also used my name to sign for debt. You laundered money through a fake company you set up in my name." Graham looked around nervously, checking to see if any employees had arrived yet. He lowered his voice to a hiss. "I just wanted to end this smoothly. I wanted a clean break. Why do you have to make this so difficult?" "A clean break," I laughed, a short, sharp sound. "I have the metadata. Graham, I saw the scan logs from your mother's home office. I know you didn't even write your own divorce petition. You are reading from a script." Graham turned the color of ash. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. That was when Brielle stepped forward. She did not look ashamed. She did not look like a mistress caught in the act. She looked bored. "Oh, stop it," Brielle said, smoothing her skirt. "Do you think you are the center of the universe? You are just a placeholder. Ava, a void in the org chart that needed to be filled by someone competent." I stared at her. Her smile was sharp and practiced. She was leaning in, invading my personal space. Her perfume suffocatingly sweet. Suddenly, I understood. She wasn't just here to sleep with my husband. She was here to provoke me. She wanted me to scream. She wanted me to slap her. If I lost control right here in the hallway, the cameras would record it, and they would have their proof of my instability. I took a deep breath and clasped my hands behind my back. "You are working very hard for that bonus." "Brielle," I said softly. The elevator chimed again, and Marianne Whitlock stepped out. She must have been tracking us. She saw the standoff and immediately swept in, her face arranged into a mask of pity. "Ava, darling," she cooed, reaching out to touch my arm. "You look terrible. You are obviously having an episode. You are tired." "Why don't we go into my office and sign the papers so you can go get some rest? I can call the clinic for you." I slapped her hand away. It was the only physical reaction I allowed myself. "Stop acting." "Marianne," I said, "I know everything. You fabricated my mental health records. You wrote the script for the divorce. You set up the shell company to siphon funds using my identity because you thought I was too stupid to notice." Marianne's expression changed instantly. The warmth evaporated, replaced by a look of sheer contempt. She straightened her spine, looking down her nose at me. "You aren't stupid, Ava," Marianne said, her voice ice cold. "You are just irrelevant. You don't understand corporate governance. You don't understand what it takes to protect a legacy. You were never built for power. You only fit the role of the victim. So you admit it." I said. "You framed me to trigger the morality clause." Marianne laughed. "It is not framing if it is necessary. The board needs certainty. We just need you removed from the company structure before the fiscal year ends. If destroying your reputation is the cost of doing business, then so be it. You are a liability." She didn't see the phone in the front pocket of my blazer. The voice recording app had been running for 3 minutes. "Thank you," I said. Marianne frowned. "For what?" "For the confession." Sloane stepped forward then, gripping my elbow firmly. "That is enough, Ava," Sloane said, pulling me back toward the elevator. "We have what we need. Do not say another word to them. We backed into the elevator. As the doors began to slide shut, I saw Graham staring at the floor, unable to look at me. Brielle looked annoyed that her trap had failed, but Marianne looked unsettled. She was staring at me as if she was seeing me for the first time. I caught my reflection in the polished brass of the elevator panel. My hair was messy, and my coat was wrinkled from sleeping in a motel. But my eyes were dry. They expected a hysterical wife. They expected tears and begging. They were not afraid of the truth. They were afraid of the woman staring back at me in the glass. They were afraid of a calm Ava. Back at Sloane's office, the atmosphere had shifted from defensive to electric. Nora was spreading old financial records across the conference table like tarot cards. Her face was pale. "Ava, look at this," Nora said, pointing to a highlighted column on a spreadsheet from 5 years ago. Whitlock and Rowe was technically insolvent in 2020. They were days away from filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Then, out of nowhere, a capital injection of $8 million saved them. I leaned in to look. Okay, so they found an investor. "Look at the name of the holding entity that provided the cash," Nora said. I read the line. "The AVA Strategic Trust. That is my name," I said, baffled. But that makes no sense. We were barely dating then. I was a broke grad student. I didn't have $8, let alone $8 million. Caleb looked up from his laptop. He was typing furiously. "Do you remember when you first started dating Graham? Did you sign anything? Maybe something for an internship or a background check?" I racked my brain. Yes. Graham got me a summer internship at the firm so we could be together. He brought me a stack of onboarding papers. He said it was just standard non-disclosure agreements and tax forms. "It wasn't just tax forms," Caleb said grimly. "I found the original scan in the archives. Buried in that stack was a limited power of attorney and a document assigning you as the trustee for an external asset. You didn't just sign up for an internship. Ava, you signed a custodial agreement." Sloane snatched the paper from Caleb and read it, her eyes widening. "This is a contingent equity clause," she muttered. "This is brilliant and evil. They used you as a vessel to hold the capital so it wouldn't appear on their personal balance sheets during the audit. You are the legal owner of that capital injection." "But where did the money come from?" I asked. I didn't have it. Nora pulled out a death certificate and a probate record. "It came from Arthur Vance," she said softly. My heart stopped. "My grandfather. He died 5 years ago. He was just a local hardware store owner. He was a silent investor in real estate for 40 years. Nora corrected. "He was worth millions. And according to this suppressed will, I just dug up from the county archives. He left the bulk of his liquid assets to you. But the executor of the estate was a lawyer who plays golf with Graham's father." I sat down heavily in the leather chair. The room spun. My grandfather had left me a fortune. The Whitlocks had found out, intercepted the will, and then Graham had seduced me. They got me to sign papers transferring that money into their company under the guise of an internship. They didn't marry me for love, I realized, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears. They didn't even marry me for my looks. They married me because I was the bank. I am not just a wife to them. I am the source of their capital. And that is why they need to declare you mentally incompetent," Sloane said, slamming her hand on the table. "If you divorce Graham, you take your $8 million plus interest with you. But if you are under a guardianship, Marianne controls your assets. She keeps the money." The realization ignited something inside me. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was a scorching fury. All those years of Graham making me feel small, of Marianne criticizing my clothes, of feeling like I was lucky to be allowed into their world. The truth was, they were living on my dime. "I want to destroy them," I said. Sloane smiled, and it was the sharpest thing in the room. "We are done playing defense. We are not just filing for divorce. We are filing a federal lawsuit for securities fraud, forgery, grand larceny, and racketeering. We are going to audit them back to the Stone Age." Just then, My phone buzzed with an urgent notification. It was an automated alert from the state court system. Petition for emergency temporary guardianship filed. Hearing scheduled Monday, 9:00 a.m. They pulled the trigger. I said, showing the screen to Sloan. Monday morning, Sloan said, checking her watch. That gives us 48 hours. If we lose on Monday, Marianne becomes your legal guardian. She will have the power to fire me, withdraw the lawsuit, and commit you to a facility. We won't lose, I said, standing up and smoothing my wrinkled blazer, because I am not going to ask for a settlement. I am going to walk into that courtroom and take back what is mine. Monday morning at 9 o'clock, the courtroom felt less like a hall of justice and more like a theater for the absurd. The air conditioning was humming too loudly, but it did nothing to cool the suffocating tension. Graham sat at the plaintiff's table, looking impeccably sad in a navy suit. Marianne sat behind him, clutching a handkerchief she had not used once. Their lawyer, a man named Sterling who charged $600 an hour, wasted no time painting me as a woman on the brink of a breakdown. He projected the fabricated emails onto the screen. He read excerpts from the diary Marianne had forged. Your Honor, Sterling boomed, gesturing to me as if I were a ticking bomb. Mrs. Whitmore is currently suffering from severe paranoia and delusions. We are asking for guardianship solely to protect her from self-destruction. Then they called Brielle to the stand. She was dressed modestly in gray, her predatory edge hidden behind soft makeup. I just wanted to help, Brielle said, her voice trembling slightly. But Ava, she would scream at empty rooms. She accused me of spying on her when I was just delivering coffee. I watched them lie. A week ago, this would have broken me. Today, I just took notes. When it was our turn, Sloan stood up. She did not raise her voice. She simply handed the judge a thick binder. Your Honor, the defense submits an independent psychiatric evaluation conducted 48 hours ago. It certifies my client is fully cognizant. We also submit the metadata for every email the plaintiff just cited. Sloan projected the folder structure of the Ava narrative onto the court screens. This folder was created 6 months ago, Sloan said. It contains drafts of the very emails Mr. Sterling just read, written weeks before they were allegedly sent by my client. This is not a record of illness. It is a premeditated smear campaign. The judge frowned, leaning over the bench to peer at the screen. Who created this folder? Marianne stood up from the gallery. Ignoring protocol, it was a rogue employee. We have already fired him. Sloan didn't even look at her. She just clicked a button. The screen changed to a server log. The folder was accessed and edited repeatedly between midnight and 3 in the morning by the user ID M. Whitlock admin, unless your rogue employee sleeps in your home office. Mrs. Whitlock, that was you. Marianne sat down slowly, her face pale. Then came our surprise. Caleb Doon took the stand. He looked terrified, but he looked at me and found his courage. I didn't want to do it, Caleb told the court, his voice cracking. They told me if I didn't hide the transfers to a W consulting, they would frame me for embezzlement. But those signatures? Ava didn't sign them. I pasted them in using a digital stamp provided by Graham. The courtroom murmured. The narrative was shifting. We were not talking about a crazy wife anymore. We were talking about fraud. Sloan called Brielle back for cross-examination. Ms. Knox, you stated you met Mr. Whitlock 3 months ago by chance. Correct? Yes, Brielle said, shifting in her seat. Then why does the building security log show you had a VIP access badge to the executive suite 7 months ago? Brielle opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at Graham for help, but he was staring at the table. Graham could not take it anymore. He stood up, his face flushed red. This is irrelevant, he shouted, startling his own lawyer. She is my wife. She is unstable. She wouldn't dare destroy the company. She knows she needs us. The courtroom went silent. Graham's outburst had done more damage than any witness. He had just revealed his true belief that I was property to be managed, not a person to be respected. The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you have anything to say?" I stood up. I smoothed my skirt. I looked directly at the judge. "I am not unstable, Your Honor. I am angry. For 5 years, I was isolated. My calendar was managed. My access to family funds was restricted. I was told I was lucky to be a Whitlock. I thought I was losing my mind, but I was just losing my agency. They didn't steal my sanity. They stole my identity to hide their crimes." The judge stared at me for a long moment. He looked at the mountain of evidence Sloan had piled on his desk. He looked at Graham, who was breathing heavily. "I am not ruling on the guardianship today," the judge said, banging his gavel. "The evidence presented suggests deeper malfeasance than a domestic dispute. I am ordering a recess. However, given the allegations of corporate mismanagement, I am hereby ordering that the Board of Directors of Whitlock and Rowe convene a mandatory emergency meeting tomorrow evening. All parties must attend." Graham looked at me with pure hatred. He thought the meeting was a chance to rally his allies. He did not know what I knew. He did not know that the meeting was exactly where I wanted him. It was time for the kill shot. The Tuesday evening board meeting was not the coronation Graham had expected. It was an execution. A court-appointed monitor sat at the head of the table, recording every breath. Marianne sat stiffly in her usual chair, while Graham paced nervously near the window. When Sloan and I walked in, the silence was heavy enough to crush bone. Sloan didn't waste time with pleasantries. She slid a single aged document across the mahogany table. "This is the original last will and testament of Arthur Vance," Sloan announced, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "It proves that the capital injection which saved this company 5 years ago did not come from an anonymous trust. It came from Ava's inheritance. An inheritance you hid from her." Marianne scoffed, though her hand trembled on the armrest. "That is ancient history. Ava signed those rights away when she joined the family." "Actually, she didn't," Sloan countered. "She signed a custodial agreement based on fraudulent misrepresentation. And here is the kicker." Sloan pulled out a second document. "We found a memorandum of understanding signed by Graham. It explicitly states that in exchange for executing the divorce strategy and removing Ava from the board, he would be immediately appointed CEO. I looked at my husband. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a merchant. And I was the merchandise he had sold to buy a title. You traded me for a chair I asked," my voice deadly quiet. Graham wiped sweat from his forehead. "It wasn't like that. Ava, I did it to protect the legacy you were never going to understand the business." "I understand enough," I said, standing up. "I understand that I own a controlling interest in the capital that keeps the lights on. So here is your choice. You can admit to the fraud, resign from all executive positions, and return my equity. Or I hand this entire file to the district attorney and we pursue criminal charges for grand larceny and forgery." The room erupted. Brielle, who had been sitting quietly in the corner as an assistant, suddenly realized the ship was sinking. She stood up, her eyes wide with panic. "I am not going to jail for you people," Brielle shouted. She pulled out her phone and shoved it toward the court monitor. "I have the texts Graham messaged me on October 4th. He told me to specifically provoke Ava at the gala. He said, 'Make her scream so we can record it.' It was a setup." "Shut up," Brielle Marianne shrieked. Graham looked desperate. He walked toward me, reaching out with both hands, his eyes wet with tears that looked impressively real. "Ava, please, don't listen to them. I made a mistake, but I love you. We can fix this. I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at him, and then I looked at the folder in my hand. "I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to end this smoothly." I recited. Graham froze. "That is a line from page 4 of the separation script your mother wrote," I said coldly. "You can't even beg for forgiveness without reading from a teleprompter." I pulled a pen from my pocket. I did not sign the divorce papers. Instead, I signed a formal shareholder resolution Sloan had prepared. I am exercising my rights under the emergency bylaws, I declared, signing my name with a flourish. I am demanding an immediate independent audit of all finances and the suspension of the current executive team pending investigation. The gavel came down swiftly in the days that followed. The judge reviewed the evidence from the board meeting, and the ruling was absolute. The petition for guardianship was dismissed with prejudice. A permanent restraining order was issued against Graham and Marianne. The court froze their personal assets and authorized my civil suit for fraud to proceed. But the criminal investigation into identity theft was the final nail in the coffin. I watched from the lobby as security escorted Marianne Whitlock out of the building. She had been stripped of her access badge and her dignity. Graham followed shortly after, carrying a cardboard box. He looked at me through the glass doors, his face a mask of shock. He had lost his wife, his job, and his reputation in a single week. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The cool evening air felt different. It tasted like freedom. I looked up at the towering glass logo of the company. For years, they had made me feel small. They had tried to divorce me from the company because they were terrified I would realize the truth. I wasn't an outsider. They let in. I was the owner. They were trying to lock out. I didn't scream. I didn't celebrate. I just walked to my car, got in, and drove away, to start a life where the only name I had to sign was my own. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Ava's revenge. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people.